Road to World War II, 1931–1934. Part 1. A World Still Wounded. The early 1930s opened with deep scars left from the First World War. Borders had shifted, empires had collapsed, and millions were still carrying memories of the trenches. The Treaty of Versailles, signed to secure peace, created resentment instead. Germany felt punished, Italy felt ignored, and Japan believed it deserved more recognition. As the decade began, people sensed that the world was uneasy, but few imagined how quickly old wounds would reopen. Part 2. The Crashing Economy. The Great Depression spread across continents like a wave of fear. Banks failed, trade froze, and families stood in long food lines. Governments struggled to keep order. Extremist political parties used anger and poverty to gain support. The global economy was collapsing, and with it, the stability that the post-war world depended on. This crisis weakened democracies and strengthened leaders who promised strong action. Part 3. Japan eyes Manchuria. Japan had grown into a modern industrial nation but lacked natural resources. Militarists inside the government believed Manchuria in northeast China was the key to solving Japan's problems. It offered coal, iron, and farmland. Japanese leaders claimed they needed more territory for national survival, and many officers felt war was not something to avoid but a way to prove Japan's strength. Part 4. The Mukden Incident. On a September night in 1931, a railway line near Mukden exploded. The damage was tiny, but Japanese officers blamed Chinese forces and immediately launched an invasion. The world later learned that the explosion was staged by Japanese soldiers themselves. But the lie had already done its job. The Japanese army swept across Manchuria with speed, facing scattered Chinese resistance. It marked the first major breach of international peace since 1918. Part 5. The Puppet State of Manchukuo. After the invasion, Japan created Manchukuo and placed the former Chinese Emperor Puyi as a figurehead ruler. Behind the scenes, Japanese officers controlled everything: laws, agriculture, industry, and the army. For civilians, life became heavily policed. The world protested, but Japan kept tightening its grip. The League of Nations sent investigators, but their report arrived too late. The invasion had succeeded. Part 6. The League hesitates. The League of Nations condemned Japan but took no real action. There were no sanctions, no military responses, and no unified pressure. Many countries were too focused on their own economic troubles. Japan saw the weakness clearly. And so did Germany. And Italy. The message was simple: the world's peacekeepers were powerless. Part 7. The Rise of Extremism in Europe. In Europe, the Depression fed political rage. In Germany, street fights erupted between political rivals. Many citizens believed democracy had failed them. Hunger dominated everyday life. Into that chaos stepped extremist movements with simple slogans and clear enemies. These movements were loud, angry, and ready to tear down the old order. Part 8. Hitler's climb toward power. Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, saw his moment. He promised jobs, national pride, and the end of humiliation. His speeches drew huge crowds desperate for hope. While many dismissed him as a radical, millions of Germans saw him as a savior. By 1932, his party became the largest in the Reichstag. The democratic system, in crisis, struggled to contain him. Part 9. January 1933, a new chancellor. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933. He entered the position through legal means, but once inside, he worked day and night to dismantle democracy. He pushed through emergency powers, shut down rival parties, and placed loyalists in every major institution. Germany was transforming, and the pace shocked even his opponents. Part 10. Germany leaves the League. One of Hitler's first major international acts was pulling Germany out of the League of Nations. He claimed Germany wanted equality among nations, not the chains imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. Many Germans cheered. Other countries watched with mixed feelings. Britain hoped negotiations could calm Germany. France worried Germany was preparing for revenge. Part 11. Secret rearmament. Germany was forbidden by the treaty from building large armed forces. Hitler ignored this immediately. Weapons factories reopened quietly. New officers trained in secret. Military planning began under coded names. Although many European diplomats knew what was happening, they convinced themselves that Germany simply wanted self-defense, not conquest. Part 12. Italy watches the shift. Italy under Benito Mussolini saw itself as a rising power. Mussolini admired bold action and despised weak diplomacy. As Japan defied the League and Germany rearmed, Italy believed the international order was collapsing. Mussolini wanted to stay important, but he also feared Germany becoming too strong. His position between cooperation and rivalry would shape Europe's future. Part 13. Japan withdraws. When the League criticized Japan's actions in Manchuria, Tokyo simply quit the organization in 1933. It was a dramatic exit, a sign that Japan cared nothing for collective peace. The League lost a major member and gained a reputation for failure. If one aggressive nation could walk away without consequences, others could do the same. Part 14. The death of trust. Diplomacy began to fade. Nations no longer trusted agreements. Countries rearmed quietly. Suspicion replaced cooperation. The promise of lasting peace from 1919 was dying. Old alliances grew uncertain. New ones silently took shape. The world was drifting toward blocs instead of unity. Part 15. The Nazi state solidifies. Inside Germany, Hitler built a totalitarian system. Newspapers were censored. Youth groups taught loyalty to the leader. Courts followed political orders. Anyone who criticized the regime risked arrest. Industries were reorganized to support military expansion. Germany was preparing for a new future, one based on dominance rather than diplomacy. Part 16. The Night of the Long Knives. In June 1934, Hitler eliminated rivals inside his own movement. Over several days, political enemies and troublesome allies were arrested or killed. This purge proved that Hitler had absolute control. The army, relieved that its influence had been protected, swore loyalty to him personally. Germany was now firmly under a dictatorship. Part 17. Austria in danger. Austria was a small neighbor with a large German-speaking population. Hitler saw it as the first step in expanding German power. Austrian Nazis, inspired by events in Germany, tried to overthrow their own government in 1934. They assassinated Austria's chancellor and attempted a coup. For a moment, it looked like Austria might fall into Hitler's hands 2 years after he took power. Part 18. Mussolini intervenes. Italy refused to let Germany dominate Austria. Mussolini sent troops to the Alpine border and warned Hitler to step back. Hitler was not yet ready for a war with Italy or the Western powers. The coup failed. Austria stayed independent for the moment. But the attempt revealed Germany's ambitions clearly. Part 19. A shaken world. By the end of 1934, nations sensed something dark on the horizon. Japan was expanding unchecked in Asia. Germany was rebuilding its military. Italy was moving toward aggressive expansion. The League of Nations had lost credibility. Democracies were weakened by economic troubles. The international system, created to prevent another world war, was falling apart piece by piece. Part 20. The march toward disaster. The world had not yet entered open conflict, but the path was becoming clear. The actions of 1931 to 1934 formed the early foundation for everything that followed. The invasions, the alliances, the betrayals, and the global war that would erupt in 1939. These years showed that peace was fragile, that ambition could overpower diplomacy, and that the world was slipping toward a confrontation far greater than anyone wanted to admit.